unassuming man expects to see the plumber at his front door. But he's greeted by a killer.
Shoots him, like, right there in the entrance to his house.
A total of 5 shots were fired.
It seems so random that it terrifies the city.
Police link this murder to another years earlier. Is there a serial killer on the loose in the nation's capital?
The entire Metro Washington area is in shock. Authorities have to find the killer before there's another knock on the door.
Alexandria, Virginia. Located on the western banks of the Potomac, Alexandria is only 7 miles away from the seat of American power, Washington, D.C.
Alexandria has a colonial history from 1749 when it was created, and it was actually originally part of the District of Columbia.
It's now part of the metropolitan Washington area, which includes Washington, D.C., Arlington, Virginia, and parts of Maryland and West Virginia. It's the best educated and highest income metropolitan area in America.
The crime rate in Alexandria is typically very low, so much so that the neighbors don't feel the need to lock their doors.
And the neighborhood where Ron Kirby lives is no different. It's November 11th, 2013, Veterans Day. 69-year-old Ron Kirby calls for a plumber to come and fix his kitchen sink.
There was a leak underneath his sink that he tried to fix. He was unable to fix it, so he got a plumber to come to the house. He was kind of waiting for the plumber to arrive.
Ron's supposed to go for lunch with his son. He can take care of this plumbing job on the way, and then they can spend some time together.
Right around the time the plumber is supposed to arrive, between 11:30 and noon, Ron answers the door.
There's a knock at the door, and Ronald Kirby opens up the door, and then there's this person standing with the gun, shoots him right there in the entrance to his house. The murderer follows him into the house, fires more rounds into Ron Kirby. After having been shot multiple times, Ron Kirby, of course, dies on the scene, and the murderer flees.
Expecting to take his father out for lunch, Ron Kirby's son, Joe, arrives at home around 12:30. Joe calls police to the Kirby residence. When police arrive, they discover Joe covered in blood and Ron dead on his living room floor.
Ron has been shot 3 times, twice in the chest and once in the hip.
But 2 other shots were fired that missed him. So a total of 5 shots were fired.
Police find 2 more bullet holes in the living room. One is in a piano, another on a radiator.
At this point, police know the shooter has fired at least 5 shots. Who is Ron Kirby, and who would want to kill him like this?
While investigators conduct ballistics testing, they delve into the life of civil servant Ronald Kirby.
Ron Kirby was a director of transportation planning for the Council of Governments, a nonprofit organization.
The Metro Washington Council of Governments represents 24 local governments in the region, working in collaboration to improve the ever-expanding metropolitan Washington area, with a population of over 6 million.
He played a very key role in the planning for the Woodrow Wilson Bridge, which connects Maryland to D.C. as part of the Beltway that runs out around Washington, D.C.
It's a huge achievement, a major piece of infrastructure that connects all of the nation's capital, and Ron had a leadership role in getting it done.
Born in Australia, Ron earns a PhD in applied mathematics in 1970 from the University of Adelaide. He adopts 2 children with his first wife. Kirby divorces in 2001 and remarries in 2012, less than 2 years before he's shot to death.
Ron is considered to be a brilliant intellectual, and at 69, he has no intention of retiring. He sees himself as a community leader and he says, what am I going to do, sit around and read books?
Why would a complete stranger come to Ron Kirby's house and shoot him? It seems much more likely to police that Ron's killer is known to him. Did Ron Kirby's adopted son, Joe, have a reason to murder his father?
Whenever there's a violent crime, police are always going to look at the family first. When it comes to a crime like this, where Ron Kirby has been shot 5 times, it seems personal.
When police arrive, they find Joe covered in blood next to his dad's body. He's now covered in blood from performing CPR on his dying father. While police focus on possible motives for Joe Kirby to murder his adoptive father, investigators look to the ballistics evidence in the home for clues. Police note that there are no spent shell casings at the scene.
Immediately, when no cartridge cases are found at the scene, the thought is that possibly a revolver was involved as opposed to a semi-automatic pistol or rifle.
Police know that 5 shots in total were fired. 3 hit Ron and 2 missed.
3 bullets were recovered at autopsy that I examined in the laboratory, and I found them to be plain lead, hollow point, .22 caliber bullets. These are all consistent with a line of ammunition called subsonic, slower velocity bullet, designed to make less noise.
Forensic scientists can obtain a surprising amount of information from a bullet.
Every weapon leaves a distinct marking on the bullet it fires. It will leave ridges, known as lands and grooves, in a certain number and twisting in a certain way. Those lands and grooves create an identifying fingerprint that can be used to connect bullet to murder weapon.
The characteristics on the bullets were 8 lands and grooves with a right twist.
By using the .22 subsonic bullet's unique lands and grooves pattern, the ballistic expert can guide police to the gun that fired it.
I gave the police officers a list of possible firearms, which included the North American Arms mini revolver, which is a 5-shot revolver.
It's odd to use a mini revolver as a murder weapon.
Less than 3 inches long and weighing 5 ounces, a 5-shot mini revolver can fire .22 caliber long rifle hollow point subsonic rounds.
Anyone who uses subsonic hollow point bullets knows that they'll have to shoot their victim multiple times, since the ammunition isn't that powerful. And if they were using a mini revolver, doubly true.
Forensic experts make a startling connection, possibly linking the unusual type of bullet to another murder.
The same type of ammunition was used in the Ronald Kirby homicide as was used in the Nancy Dunning 10 years earlier.
This was like a parlor game. Everybody had their own theory about what happened to Nancy Dunning and how this murder could have possibly happened.
What are the odds you've got the subsonic, unusual, hollow point, .22 caliber long-range rifle ammo coming out of a mini revolver 10 years earlier and only a mile apart?
10 years earlier, just 1 mile from the Kirby residence, in the affluent Del Rey neighborhood of Alexandria, Nancy Dunning receives a knock on her door.
Now, it had been 10 solid years since the murder of Nancy Dunning. So the idea that the murder of Ronald Kirby might be in some way related to Nancy Dunning actually did seem kind of remote at the time.
2 houses a mile apart, the same ammunition, both in broad daylight. Did a serial killer come out of hibernation? Police have to find this killer before they strike again.
The police usually look at their spouses. Usually a person who's murdered is killed by somebody they know.
She happened to be the wife of the sheriff in Alexandria.
Did the suspect wear gloves, or did the supposedly law and order sheriff murder his own wife?
November 11th, 2013, an affluent neighborhood of Alexandria, Virginia. Civil servant Ron Kirby is murdered at his front door. A total of 5 shots are fired. ballistics experts link the ammunition to a murder 10 years earlier and only 1 mile away. December 5th, 2003. When Nancy doesn't show up for a lunch with husband Jim and son Chris, they go back home to check in.
I think it was like 11:30 that day. She was a no-show, and she was very punctual. This is not someone that you would expect to be late, so they knew that immediately something was wrong.
The front door is left open. What the husband and son discover inside is documented in a chilling 911 call.
Alexandria Police 911.
I need help now.
What's wrong?
What?
What's wrong?
Oh my God, Dad! Something's wrong with Mom! Oh my God!
Hello?
Yes!
What's wrong?
Somebody came and attacked my mother or something. I don't know.
Is your mother breathing?
I don't know. I don't know.
Okay, what do you see?
I see blood. She's been cut or something.
Okay, cut where?
I don't know. I don't know.
Okay.
They're obviously distraught about the situation, and it was, lots of blood. It was everywhere.
My wife has been murdered.
She's been murdered?
Yes. She's lying in a pool of blood about a few stairs near the front door.
Okay, can you tell if she's breathing?
No, she's not. She has no pulse.
Okay, the police are on the way, okay?
And no one knew, why anyone would want to kill Nancy Dunning. She didn't have any enemies, really, that anybody knew about. She was known as the Queen of Del Rey. Del Rey is a very bucolic neighborhood here in Alexandria, and she was an extremely prominent real estate agent and kind of transformed Del Rey into what it is now.
The morning of December 5th, 2003, Nancy goes shopping for Christmas gifts before a planned lunch with Jim and Chris. She drops the items off at home when she hears a knock at the door. Nancy Dunning is shot in the chest, arm, and ear.
Nancy Dunning had been shot 3 times. The bullets were unusual in that I had never seen them in the laboratory before in my entire career. They were plain lead hollow point bullets made by Remington. So a similar type of ammunition that was used in the Ron Kirby homicide and the Nancy Dunning homicide.
In terms of evidence, it's not like there were fingerprints or DNA or anything like that. The real chief bit of evidence was the ammunition, the rounds that were found.
Detectives also find a receipt in a bag from Nancy's shopping trip that morning.
She was doing some shopping to get sort of Christmas gifts for this charity that she was involved in. No one knew, why anyone would want to kill Nancy Dunning. She was extremely popular, well-loved person. She also happened to be the wife of the sheriff in Alexandria, Jim Dunning, who was an elected sheriff.
Whenever somebody is murdered, the police usually look at their spouses very closely because usually a person who's murdered is killed by somebody they know.
There are no fingerprints or DNA evidence that would suggest a stranger was there. Did the suspect wear gloves when he knocked on the door? Or did the supposedly law and order sheriff murder his own wife?
Here in Alexandria, rumors were just swirling about the possibility that he might have either done it or been involved in hiring a hitman to do it. People were very frightened and people were very upset and people had very high anxiety for years and years and years.
Sheriff Jim Dunning is interviewed by police, but he has a clear alibi and no motive can be found. Jim is quickly cleared by police, but in the public eye, rumors continue to swirl.
The fact that it was unsolved for so long led to all kinds of rumors and speculation. Then it just dragged on for years and years and years as an unsolved mystery.
This would all change 10 years later when Ron Kirby is shot at his front door in the middle of the day.
I was able to identify some of the bullets together in the Ronald Kirby homicide, but when I cross-compared them to the Nancy Dunning homicide, I could not associate them. They had similar class characteristics, the number of lands and grooves and the direction of twist, the width of the lands and groove impressions, but the microscopic markings were different, which would mean either a different firearm of similar nature was used or a dramatic change had happened to the interior of the barrel of the firearm between these two homicides.
This would completely befuddle investigators. The bullets are so unusual, and yet they come from different guns?
They did not have DNA evidence. They did not have fingerprint evidence. All the circumstantial evidence they had was the forensic evidence here.
Desperate for any clues that could help solve the two murders, Alexandria police issue a public appeal for information, using the 10th anniversary of Nancy's murder as a reason.
It's been 10 years since the death of Sheriff Dunning's wife, Nancy Dunning. And it's significant to us because we continue after 10 years to work to try and resolve and get an arrest on this case.
When reporters ask if the two murders might be connected, the police chief denies it, but doesn't close the door.
There are some eerie similarities, the area, the time of the year, no forced entry into the home, that kind of thing.
My detectives have looked at that. It was natural to look at any type of parallel issues associated with the cases. Where some exist, we have no reason today to think that those two cases are connected.
When the death of Ron Kirby happened, there weren't really a lot of people that were making the connection with the murder of Nancy Dunning, although it did seem suspicious to some people that it happened right in the middle of the day. It was a knock at the door, unsolved mystery. It actually did raise some suspicions.
We did indeed look at that, but we don't close the door on those possibilities. The Kirby investigation is fairly fresh for what we've just had. That tragedy just occurred. We're working diligently around the clock with my investigators on that right now.
Now the chief has sent a clear message. If there is a link, if there is a serial killer that's become active in Alexandria, they are looking at it. But can they catch the killer before there's another victim?
I hope someone who hears this message will rethink their role in this investigation, whether it be a witness, certainly if somebody had a role in the actual murder itself.
It's almost exactly 10 years between the first murder and the second.
Most people did not make that connection between the murder of Nancy Dunning and the murder of Ronald Kirby. It wasn't until the third murder that people started putting those pieces together.
It will take only weeks before the killer strikes a third time, less than a mile away from the other two shootings.
This time, things don't go as expected for the killer.
The wife of Alexandria, Virginia's sheriff is murdered at her front door. 10 years later, a leader in city planning is killed in the same way, with the same ammunition, less than a mile from the first shooting. Police hold a news conference, hoping to catch the killer before they can strike again.
Obviously, we're here to discuss a very significant homicide in the city of Alexandria.
Little do they know, the killer already has a third victim in his sights. Ruth Ann Lodato is a piano teacher in Alexandria, whose home is less than a mile away from the location of the previous two shootings.
It was just a few months later, a similar situation, right in the middle of the day, broad daylight. Knock at the door. She opens the door.
Was it something personal about Ruth Ann that made her the third target, or was she just in the wrong house at the wrong time?
Ruth Ann Lodato is from a very prominent family here in Alexandria. Her father was a judge, her brother was a judge. The family is extremely well known. She had a music school. Many young kids were part of this music school, so she was well known, the family was well known.
Her mother lives in a granny suite at the back of the house, and a home care worker, Janet, spends her time there.
Again, it was a very similar situation to the first two homicides, where apparently somebody knocked at the door, and when she answered, she was immediately shot. There was a witness at Ruth Ann Lodato's shooting, a woman who was a home health care aide.
The home care worker hears Ruth Ann's scream and comes face to face with the killer.
Ruth Ann Lodato was shot 3 times, and then 2 more shots were fired in the direction of the home health care worker.
Janet is shot in the arm. But before the shooter can kill her, he runs out of bullets.
What Janet does next is nothing short of heroic.
Janet gets both Ruth Ann and her mother out of harm's way and has the neighbor call 911, despite being shot herself.
Do you need police or medics?
Police.
Okay. What's going on there,
The
sir?
caregiver next door, caregiver to an elderly woman, just ran over and told me that there's an intruder in the house.
And she said someone came into the home. Are they still in the home? And where is the elderly lady?
She's on my arm right now and taking her to my house.
Okay. Can you ask the young woman that works there, what is the address there to the house?
Well, she just ran back over.
Why did you let her leave if someone was intruding into the home, sir?
The killer gets out of there once he runs out of bullets, but not before Janet, the home care worker, gets a good look at him.
Ruth Ann Lodato is shot twice in the chest and once in the arm. She will succumb to her wounds, but not before talking to the police.
Since witnesses have watched the killer leave the house, it rules out the possibility that he picked up the tiny spent shell casings. Also, they saw a little muzzle in his sleeve.
The police theory that the weapon is a mini revolver is locked in.
Ruth Ann also tells the police she didn't recognize the shooter's face. It was a stranger who knocked on her door.
Janet, the caregiver, survives the ordeal. Police now have an eyewitness who has seen the Alexandria assassin.
The eyewitness here was able to work with the police artist to create what they call this composite image, like an artist rendering of what the guy would look like. Piercing eyes, long white beard, disheveled hair. This was used to create the artist's rendering that went out to the public.
As police put together a composite sketch, they examined the bullets taken from Ruth Ann Lodato's body.
I had never seen it in another shooting case in my 34 years with the laboratory. The same type of ammunition was used with a similar general rifling characteristic.
5 bullets are recovered at the scene of the third murder. The same type of .22 caliber hollow point subsonic long rifle bullets.
The same bullets at all 3 shootings. The same MO. The same area in Alexandria. Ballistics will tell us if the bullets were fired from the same gun.
The general rifling characteristics on the bullets were similar. 8 lands and grooves with a right twist. The width of the land and grooves matched those widths of the lands and grooves in the first 2 homicides. But again, the microscopic markings were different. I was very comfortable assuming that they were all related, but I was very surprised that I could not associate the firearms between each shooting.
While law enforcement know a 5-shot mini revolver is used, the evidence suggests it is a different mini revolver each time.
A very important piece of this crime scene was the surveillance footage of an automobile fleeing the scene.
Several neighbors of Ruth Ann Lodato have security cameras which capture a suspicious vehicle driving quickly out of the neighborhood moments after Ruth Ann is shot.
The first murder happened in 2003. Now we're into 2014. People have all of these surveillance cameras everywhere these days. And so there was one of the neighboring houses to Ruth Ann Lodato had 2 cameras that caught the automobile fleeing the scene. And so that actually ended up being a key piece of evidence in the case. The artist's rendering of what this guy looked like, according to the eyewitness to the murder of Ruth Ann Lodato, goes out to the community. We publish it in the newspapers, all over television. And so a lot of people say, yeah, I know that guy. So the police interviewed the guy at issue, and it turned out that he was not the murderer.
But the suspect points a finger at another man who fits their profile, a man named Charles Severance. Charles Severance is a local man who has run for mayor of Alexandria twice as an independent.
The 71st mayor of Alexandria must advocate tax breaks for business and support labor by doing the following. Eliminate local tax on transient lodging, eliminate local tax on restaurant food.
Severance's political career would certainly draw attention. On the campaign trail, his behavior has been erratic.
And make the following expenditure decreases. Terminate Human Relations Department.
He wears this black getup and talks about how child psychologists are terrorizing the city.
Cut mental health general fund. Terminate mental retardation residential group home. I believe these measures, if taken, will improve the city of Alexandria.
In the 1996 mayoral election, he finished second. There were only 2 candidates.
And, well, that's all I have to say right now.
Police add the name of Charles Severance to a list of possible leads to investigate. Police discover a curious connection to the 2003 murder of Nancy Dunning.
There's the surveillance footage from Target the day that Nancy Dunning was murdered.
Security video at the department store shows a man in a black jacket and widow's peak.
They've got surveillance footage of someone who looks like Charles Severance, circa 2003.
The man follows Nancy as she shops for Christmas gifts. He stops and pretends to tie his shoe, and then follows Nancy through the store.
The security camera footage from Target actually shows the serial killer following her around the Target while she was there.
He doesn't shop for anything himself. He follows Nancy right out of the store.
And then she went home, and the serial killer clearly followed her to her house.
The security footage is low quality, but detectives match the distinctive widow's peak and black leather jacket to a photo of Charles Severance from 2003. Police try to locate Charles Severance through his girlfriend, but come up empty.
At this point, leads are coming in from everywhere. Police need to make a bold move to catch their suspect.
Concerned that the killer may strike again, Alexandria's chief of police notifies the media that they believe the 3 murders to be linked.
This is a gamble. Police know that this announcement is going to cause panic as it confirms suspicions that many people have had in DC.
Like, this is a serial murderer on the loose, so yeah, there was a intense community reaction to this.
By telling everyone about the unusual ammunition, they're hoping that someone will come forward with more information.
The day after police announced there's a serial murderer at large in Alexandria, they receive a tip from an unlikely place, the Russian embassy. March 2014, the greater Washington, D.C. area is rocked when Alexandria police confirm their fears. 3 seemingly random murders are linked. The day after police appealed to the public for help locating a serial killer, Charles Severance rides his bike to the Russian embassy. Claiming political persecution by the city of Alexandria, Severance seeks asylum from Russia by sneaking into the compound, but U.S. Secret Service agents turn him away.
They ask him questions and take his picture, but they don't have anything to charge him with, so they have to let him leave on his bike. But out of curiosity, they follow him.
The agent identifies Severance from his passport and remembers the composite image of the Alexandria assassin, along with a description of the suspicious vehicle caught fleeing from the scene of Ruth Ann Lodato's murder.
If they had been able to search his vehicle here, who knows what they would have found?
The Secret Service files a report with Alexandria police, and the focus of the investigation turns to Charles Severance.
Charles Severance was a guy who's from Northern Virginia. He went to George Mason University here in the region. He went to UVA, University of Virginia, down in Charlottesville. So kind of a local guy and very well educated, worked as an engineer.
Severance also designs his own anti-establishment games. He runs a website called Mental Disorder where he tries to sell them.
He had a short-lived relationship with this woman, and they had a child. There was a custody dispute over the child. The court came to the conclusion that the child needed to be separated and to essentially never see the father again.
Severance also has a felony gun possession charge on his record, which means he can't buy or possess a firearm.
As a result of that gun possession charge, it was actually illegal for him to own a firearm or be in possession of ammunition.
Charles Severance is a highly unusual man. He's spooked, which is why he sought asylum in the first place. He knows from his girlfriend that the police are looking for him, so he takes off.
Severance's girlfriend tells police he had gone camping. They search the home and bring her in for questioning.
Linda tells police that in 2011, Charles insisted that she get guns for her own protection. 2 5-shot mini revolvers and a box of .22 caliber subsonic ammunition.
When police search the home, they find guns, but no 5-shot mini revolver. They do find a box of .22 subsonic ammunition. Police scour the Metro Washington area on the lookout for Severance's vehicle with the warrant for his arrest. Finally, on March 12, 2014, Severance's debit card is used at a hotel in Wheeling, West Virginia. Police are sent surveillance footage of Severance checking into the hotel. He's dressed the same as he was at the Russian embassy. Police spot his bike outside of a nearby library.
Severance used the internet to plan his escape from the area. He was about to disappear forever when police finally tracked him down.
Severance's car, the same car that's caught on surveillance footage outside of Ruth Ann Ladato's home, is found in a hotel parking lot. Police execute a search warrant, but what they do find comes as a shock.
There's no gun here, no ammunition, but there is a gun cleaning kit and a bunch of latex gloves. There's a black jacket, and they would discover what has become known as Severance's Manifesto of Hate.
Police find journals that Severance keeps, which detail his rage at what he feels is an elite that has taken his son from him. There are hundreds of pages detailing Severance's rage at the police, court system, city of Alexandria, and belief in violence.
He recounted his innermost thoughts about the court system and his grudge against the court system and how he blamed Alexandria society for being separated from his child. Violent thoughts about murder and doing harm to people who he felt had wronged him. The writings of a violent, deranged man.
Severance calls himself a noble savage, chopping out a homestead in the backwoods of America. I guess everyone's the hero of their own story? But unfortunately, there's nothing in his journals that identifies the murder victims.
The search of Severance's car yields several pieces of evidence, but there's no smoking gun.
More circumstantial evidence. There's no murder weapon here, no fingerprints or DNA, so they can't place him at a murder scene. Charging him with the crime would be a big risk.
They were actually holding him on this firearms charge while they put together their murder charges against him. It was just like a stalling move that the prosecutors were using to keep him behind bars so that they could put together their murder charge against him. The prosecutors actually had a difficult decision to make because they could have done 3 separate murder trials. They decided to put them all together and try them as a triple murder case, which was a gamble because you're putting all of your eggs in one basket there. So if you don't get the jury to go with the triple murder case, then you've lost because you can't do double jeopardy. So it was a gamble.
With rumors and speculation ripping through Alexandria, prosecutors decide it's a gamble they have to take.
Charles Severance was charged with first-degree murder for Nancy Dunning's homicide and capital murder for Ronald Kirby and Ruth Ann Lodato. Also a malicious wounding charge for the home health care worker that he wounded, as well as the use of a firearm in all 4 of those cases, and then 2 counts of possession by a convicted felon of a firearm.
Can prosecutors convince a jury that Charles Severance is the Alexandria assassin? In 2003, prominent real estate agent Nancy Dunning is shot at her front door. 10 years later and a mile away, Ron Kirby, a senior transportation planner, suffers the same fate. A third victim, beloved piano teacher Ruth Ann Lodato, is shot and killed at her front door in the same neighborhood as Kirby and Dunning.
3 murders, all in broad daylight, all with the same subsonic hollow point ammunition, with similar guns, but not the same.
Prosecutors charge local politician Charles Severance with the shootings.
The defense goes for a scattershot approach to creating reasonable doubt. They point out that Severance doesn't look like the Composite sketch, when clearly he's trying to change his appearance. They also want to call his sanity into question, which may explain his outbursts in court.
Prosecutors use Severance's own words from his notebooks to link him to the murder weapons used in the crimes.
Police purchased 3 North American Arms 22 caliber mini revolvers and 500 rounds of subsonic ammunition. The 5-round stainless steel with the wooden grip is small and easily concealed. Thou shalt kill, and vengeance is mine, saith the Lord. Hollow point and below the speed of sound is sweet music and very effective. Violence wins.
The notebooks that show the internal workings of his mind actually were very important because they sort of showed you that this was someone not only in possession of this very specific kind of ammunition, but also someone who had the mental workings of a serial killer.
One passage in his notebook reads, knock, talk, enter, kill, exit, murder, wisdom.
This is all very disturbing, but prosecutors still need to convince a jury that Severance had a reason to target his 3 victims.
Prosecutors show the jury the signature at the bottom of the custody order that took Charles Severance's son away from him. The signature of Sheriff Jim Dunning.
Now we've got the murder of the wife of the sheriff. We've got a murder of the guy who was responsible largely for the construction of the Woodrow Wilson Bridge, which Charles Severance actually campaigned against when he ran as mayor. And we also have the murder of the sister of a prominent judge.
I received a total of 13 bullets from the 3 different homicides that I had to talk about, as well as clothing from one of the victims for examination. There were a couple of fired cartridge cases that were collected from one of the residences where Charles Severance had been living. I examined those, and all these things I testified to at trial.
Despite the forensics connecting the ammunition to Charles Severance, there's still the issue of the murder weapons.
I could not identify all the bullets together, and I couldn't identify the same gun having been used in all 3 cases, but that in fact went the way the prosecution wanted it to, because they had evidence that he had 3 different similar type firearms.
A few months after the murder of Nancy Dunning, police confiscate a concealed weapon from Charles Severance at a traffic stop.
One of the weapons that he had in his possession was a North American Arms mini revolver, which is believed to have been the murder weapon from the Nancy Dunning case. But there was nothing to tie him to that at the time.
The weapon is stored as evidence, then destroyed in 2006.
It's not the kind of smoking gun prosecutors are hoping for, but it does suggest that Severance had that type of weapon back in 2003. Then we have the testimony of his girlfriend, Linda Robra. This paints a pretty clear picture.
Robra testifies that she bought 2 mini revolvers and ammunition at the request of Charles Severance, and that the weapons are now missing.
No one knows exactly where those guns went to, whether they were dumped or whether he hid them somewhere. They have not been recovered.
All of the evidence against Charles Severance was all circumstantial. They did not have the murder weapon. We still don't know where the murder weapon is, even today. They did not have DNA evidence. They did not have fingerprint evidence. All the circumstantial evidence they had was the forensic evidence here that there's a very specific kind of ammunition that Charles Severance had actually written about in his notebooks, the .22 long rifle Remington subsonic. He had talked about how it made music to his ears.
Janet, the home care worker, takes the stand. She points to Charles Severance as the man she sees at the front door when Ruth Ann Lodato is murdered.
Losing his son in a custody dispute seems to turn Severance's resentment against elites into a dangerous obsession. He wants to terrorize the establishment. But is there enough evidence for the jury to convict?
Charles Severance is found guilty on all 10 counts. He is given 3 life sentences, plus 48 years and a $400,000 fine.
The thought of a stranger knocking on your door out of the blue and then shooting you terrorized this community for a long time.
Sheriff Jim Dunning does not live long enough to see Severance get convicted in the murder of his wife.
Jim Dunning, there was this cloud of suspicion over him for years and years and years. And so after he was no longer the sheriff here in Alexandria, he actually had to move to South Carolina because of all the speculation swirling around him. And unfortunately, he died with this cloud of suspicion over him as potentially being part of a murder that he had nothing to do with.
In the end, it was the whole community working together, from ballistics experts to eyewitnesses and neighbors, that made it safe for Alexandria to answer their door again.